everyone. Welcome to the Ashley Barlow Company podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host. If you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who works at a school, or you're a community member, a volunteer, or a staff member at an organization that supports people with special education plans, a coach, a tutor, or even a grandparent, you're in the right place. Sit back with an ice cold glass of lemonade, put on your walking shoes and grab some headphones, roll down the windows and cruise. Ready, set, go. Educate, advocate, collaborate. Hi, friends. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Special Education Advocacy Podcast with Ashley Barlow. I'm Ashley Barlow, and I'm so happy you're here. Today, we talk with my friend, Deanna ABRIL, who is an attorney in Florida and also the mom to an adorable little guy, Lucas, who has autism. Deanna is kind of new in her parent advocacy journey, and I thought her story would be helpful to share with you, particularly if you are embarking on this special education advocacy journey as a parent or as somebody that is new to advocacy altogether. Because what we talk about in today's episode is really kind of three main topics. We talk about the importance of parent advocacy altogether. And that's actually a topic that Deanna is going to be talking about at my Special Education and Advocacy Conference. That conference is taking place on January 23rd, 2020. It's entirely free, entirely virtual. And if you haven't already registered, I encourage you to check out the website, which is ashleybarlowco.com/conference. All of the details are there. So Deanna and I talk about the importance of parent advocacy and why it is so important for parents to get involved. But even if you've assumed that fact, it's still intimidating. And so what I really dug into with Deanna is how to get started in that advocacy journey, what skills an advocate needs, and then tackling the mom guilt. How do I cope with the fact that I don't have all the answers, and sometimes I don't even know where to find the answers? And so this podcast will help you probably no matter where you are in your advocacy journey, but particularly if you are at the beginning of the journey. Deanna is one of our speakers at the conference, which is on January 23rd. She's a wonderful friend. She's an incredible advocate. She's a special education attorney that's new to the field. I think you're going to like today's episode. Let's listen in. Hi, Deanna.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start and just let you introduce yourself to my audience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself professionally and about your family?
Sure. So I have been practicing law for 16 years now. So I'm an attorney. I started practicing in corporate and M&A law, and then I went in-house for about 12 years. And this year, I kind of decided to go off on my own and started my own firm, still practicing corporate law. And I added also special education law to my practice. In addition to that, I have 3 kids. I'm a mom of 3. I have a 6.5-year-old daughter. I have a 5-year-old son and another 2-year-old son.
And you live in the Miami area, right?
I live in Miami. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Awesome. And just for people that aren't lawyers like you and me, M&A is mergers and acquisitions, right?
That's right. Yes.
So different than special education. And so tell us why you added special ed.
Okay. So my middle son, Lucas, was diagnosed with autism at age 2. So that was about 3 years ago. So when he got diagnosed, we had to start all the therapies, and we had to start, well, even before the diagnosis, I had to start kind of getting, I was looking for information on autism because I suspected that's what it was going to be. And I started just getting more knowledgeable about the diagnosis. the disability. And then, once we started with the meetings and stuff, I just started getting more involved in that side of it, personally, for personal reasons. But I always kind of thought in the back of my mind that, I have legal skills. It has nothing to do with special ed law, so I don't know anything about that. But there must be, I should be able to do this, right? And I always thought kind of maybe in the future, once I kind of get the knowledge and start practicing it with my first client, who's my son, that maybe I can do something with this, because at that point it was kind of personal, and it was something that I knew I was going to get a lot of joy out of, to be able to, work with other families like ours and help other families like ours. So that's kind of why. And then, starting my own firm at the beginning of the year just gave me the opportunity to actually do what I wanted to do, aside from what I had been doing, which I also enjoy. And so that's kind of how that practice was born for me. It was a result of my son, who inspired me to do it. So.
Well, and there's such a need, I remember when I decided to add special education specifically, I had always done a little bit of schoolwork because I had been a teacher, and my uncle's an attorney, and he had done that kind of work. And he died actually when I was in law school. So, I got a lot of people that were kind of looking for him that found me. But when I finally decided, okay, we're going to do special education here, and I'm going to go get myself trained and empower myself with information like you did. In 1 year, it was my second highest grossing practice area. Wow. And I was still pretty much a general practice in a small town. Wow. So, there's such a need.
Yeah, there is. There really is.
And the other thing that I think about special ed, by way of, things, practice areas for attorneys, is I, like you, have a really specific reason to care about special ed. And I think right. that, where there's that passion, it really does help.
I agree. That's what I always thought about. And then once, I went to a COPAA conference, which is where I met you. But once I was there, I realized how many other people were there for the same reasons. So that was, that was really nice to see.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to have you on today's podcast, because, excuse me, I think there are so many people, parents out there, and also disability organization staff, folks that work at autism organizations, Down syndrome organizations, et cetera. And I think they think, where do I start? I don't know where to start. And I remember when I had an epiphany. My son was probably, about preschool aged, and I realized I have totally figured out Down syndrome. Yeah. And I didn't go to a class on it. I learned it on my own, and this little boy taught it to me. Right. And so I can totally empower myself to also learn special education. How do I know everything? And I always think this is funny. When I go to a medical appointment and people say, "Are you in healthcare?" And I'm like, "No, but I practically could be."
I know.
And part of that's my personality. I'm probably kind of bossy when I'm there and act like I know. But it's like we've become the expert on our children. And so this is not beyond reach. Understanding special education is not beyond reach. And that's kind of why I've started this company, because I really want people to have that access. And so my question for you relative to that is, how did you start? How did you start to empower yourself with information about special ed advocacy?
So I had been wanting to get into it for a long time, and I would start just doing research once we started the IEP process. Once he entered public school, I started getting into the nuts and bolts a little bit more. But I also did a program which is called Partners in Policymaking. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they have it in different states. And I just, I started following a lot of people in the disability community, in the autism community, the centers, the therapists, organizations, all of that. And I just would always see information. And that's how I came across Partners in Policymaking. And their whole thing is they have a program set up for parents of children with disabilities, children or adults with disabilities, and for self-advocates also. And so every year they take on a class. I did it in Florida, and it's a 6-month program, and you get to do 1 weekend a month, and it's 2 days, 2 full days. So I remember I had to take Fridays off and then do Friday and Saturday. They bring in different speakers, and it's basically to empower parents and help them not only advocate for their children, but also to think about, really advocating for system-wide change where it's necessary. So they teach us about, it's very inclusion focused. So they teach us about inclusion in education, inclusion in employment, inclusion in housing, in all of the areas that impact a person's life. And then there's also a big chapter on just talking to your legislators, meeting with your legislators, and all that stuff, kind of legislative change. So once I did that, I kind of was a lot more empowered, and I became a little bit more, it kind of focused me in on what I really wanted to do. And things have just happened in a way that it's just led me there, really, just by coincidence. So, like, not by coincidence, but just everything has kind of led me to this path where I am right now. So it's been very interesting.
And it's so interesting to me that was kind of your start, because I picked up on a little thing that you said earlier, in that you said, well, I'm an attorney, so essentially I have the advocacy skills. I should have the skill set to be able to advocate for my child. Now all I need is the content, the special education. And
Right.
So here you are thinking, okay, I need to learn how to advocate for my child. And so you go to a policymaking seminar where you learn more advocacy skills.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, what I think is so cool about that is that really what we need is just the passion, and that's your passion got fueled through that process, right?
It really did. It just kind of made me see the future and the possibilities in a different way. And we learned about the history of the disability rights movement and the advocacy movement, and it really was fueled by parents of people with disabilities and people with disabilities. So that did kind of inspire me to just keep moving forward. But that was a good kind of beginning, but then I still needed the special ed law part of it. And
Right.
Then that's when I started doing, webinars, workshops, conferences that were geared towards parents and lawyers. So, I just started getting more and more into it, and that's what I've been doing the last few years.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, with the internet, you can find webinars and workshops and conferences and Facebook Lives and so many different places to go. So I'll tell you what I did was I bought a few books. And it's funny, Pete Wright talks about this in his one-day training about how just kind of it's like a cultural thing. If you walk in with a stack of books, they're going to be like, oh, this person is empowered, right?
Yeah.
So I seriously did just take a big bag of books. Like, I think a lot of parents out there that have kids with disabilities understand that you just feel like a better parent if you have all the books about autism, or if you have all the books about Down syndrome.
I know. I still have a lot just sitting on my nightstand that I haven't gotten around to reading yet.
Yeah, but you feel like a better parent for having had them. You bought them.
I have the books.
I have the books. And that's, certainly how I fall into that category too. But I went to the William and Mary Law School / rights law training. It's a week-long training called the Institute of Special Education Advocacy. I'm actually on the faculty of that this year, just 5 years. It's so crazy how life kind of comes full circle. But that was kind of my first training to put everything comprehensively together. And when I did that, I thought, well, okay, that was great because I got something on behavior and something on eligibility and something on progress monitoring. But, I'm an attorney. And so I used my skill set and thought, this is so disorganized. I need to find it, in an organized way. So I went to, I think at least 3 different universities. I went to their bookstores and I
Okay.
said, how did you find, or, what are your books on special education? And it was, what's really funny is they wouldn't give them to me because I wasn't like registered for a class.
Oh,
And so
really?
at all 3 schools, I had to be really like super advocate and be like, well, I want to do this and I want to do that. Could I at least look at them? Can you pull them out from behind that little desk, whatnot? And eventually I got them all, but it was hard at all 3 schools. So I literally read kind of law school books because
Yeah.
that's what spoke to me. Of course, there are books out there that are geared more toward parents, with parents as an audience.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting how we all empower ourselves differently.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
So, what do you think are the important skills that you have as an attorney? What are those legal skills, and how do parents kind of channel those skills that they have?
So I have, research skills that I learned in law school. And that really helped me a lot at the beginning. And I think law school changes you a little bit too. So before Lucas even was diagnosed and I suspected that there was something going on in his development, I would just research all the time on my phone, like researching this, researching that. I already knew all the places to go for help, all the therapists. I did so much research by the time we got the diagnosis. It's like I already had a ton of information, and people would give me pamphlets and paperwork, and with all of the information I already knew.
Right.
Or have you done this? Have you done that? I'm like, yes, done. Like I've already done all. I'm already registered here, registered there. So I think, the research skills, obviously, but that's something anybody can do. You don't need to be a
Right.
lawyer. It's just something we're taught as lawyers to do. I think that would be the first one. I don't know. I mean, obviously being a lawyer, we're used to advocating for our clients. So I always say that Lucas is my first special education client.
Yeah, he is. He is.
So, yeah. So, it was kind of an easy transition to go from advocating for a client to advocating for your child. It's definitely a little bit different because there's a lot more emotion involved, but I think I already kind of had some of those skills, and those are also skills that are not specific to a lawyer.
That's why I asked you it this way, because I
yeah,
think what we know we have as a lawyer are things that other people already have inside of them too,
exactly.
but they don't know it. They don't know how to
Right.
channel it. And so I think I agree with you. It's advocating for other people, and it is that ability to research and to get to the why behind something.
Yeah.
And that's, other parents have that. They just don't know that they have it.
Yes.
And that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, even having the legal background, you think I should be able to do this, but then you go into it and you're like, I can do it, but I don't know it. So now I have to learn it. But that's something anybody can do, like you said. So, but I think those two things are, were important things that I could just kind of translate into that area.
Yeah, you've set a really good example for other parents in learning how to do that. And I think that that's, a testament to that spirit that we talked about, that, the drive and the empowerment with the information that you got in your very first training, that thought, okay, now I want to learn more and I want to learn more. One thing that I'll say to parents at this point, though, is we have another friend who's also been on the podcast, Sarah. And Sarah, I'm going to sell you out here. Maybe she won't listen and she won't know I'm going to talk about her for a second. But what Sarah said to me recently is, oh, I just think I want to go to law school because I think that, when I call you, Ashley, on a case, you've got this other idea. And your idea is always so good and it always works. And I said, but Sarah, when I call you on a case, your idea is always right and your idea always works too. It's that we all have different advocacy styles, and we all kind of speak to what's true to ourselves. And so, one of the things that I love about being an attorney. And one of the reasons why I went to law school is because there usually isn't a right answer.
Right.
There's usually,
Yes.
75 different ways to get to an agreement or a judgment or preparing a case or whatever. And I like that, that kind of idea of like, no doesn't mean no to me. It means, well, how do we look at this differently?
Right.
And so, like, what I like to tell to parents, though, is even attorneys and advocates that do this full time and have done this for years, we don't always know all the answers.
Right.
We don't always feel super confident, but we research it, we figure it out, and then we go have the conversations.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I think that's a good thing to put in there. So, okay. So parent advocacy, why is it so important?
Well, I think the outcomes are probably better when the parents are involved. I don't think that you could just let the school give you what they want to give you and assume that they're always, thinking about your child's best interest. They have other agendas as well. So I think as a parent, you're going to be the one that's going to have your child's best interest at heart. You're the one that's going to be most motivated to make sure that your child succeeds. And so I think that you're the one that's going to kind of make it happen. I think a lot, your child the best, obviously, you're the parent. And you're going to have people on your team that are going to help you in the process. But ultimately, you know your child best, and you kind of have an idea of what you want for them. And I think that it's important to be involved. Like when I first, not even involved, but just very involved. So when I first started, I was so overwhelmed, despite what, we talked about, my legal background and all of this, but I didn't really know anything about special education law. And it was overwhelming. I thought, I don't want to mess this up. I want to do it right from the beginning. So I had people help me at the beginning. I had advocates that were on my side. And I kind of thought like they know best, and I let them just run with it. And then that first experience was a very, very good learning experience for me, because I realized one, that it's important to make sure that you're very aligned with the people that are helping you. So obviously everyone's going to come from different places and have different opinions, but at the core, like your principles on what you want for your child really have to align, I think.
Right.
So that was one thing that I learned. And then the other thing is that you really can't just delegate it completely to somebody else. Because I didn't really feel any better. I mean, we had some great ideas. She helped us a lot. But I still didn't feel in control of it. And so after that is when I really was like, okay, even if I have people helping me, which I still do, I still reach out to a lot of different people to help us. I need to know this, and I need to be driving this process, and I need to be in control, and I need to know what everyone else on the team is saying, what they're talking about, and agree with it. So that was a big learning experience for me as well, that you can't just delegate it to somebody. You really have to be involved as a parent.
I think that control thing is a really interesting piece of it, because one of the things that I really try to hammer in here as a result of this podcast and the other materials that I have available on my website, and even my paid Special Education and Advocacy Lab, the online training course, what I really try to drive in is that parents need to empower themselves with information so that they have an equal voice at that IEP table. And you're right, the thing that we're the most afraid of is giving up control, because we've worked so hard with all of the therapies and all of the doctor's appointments and all of the seminars that we've gone to, and the materials that we've purchased, and the time that we've put in, and the failed attempts. I mean, I can't tell you how many, I can't tell you how many reading programs I've bought, but for every reading program I've bought 5 different kinds of sunscreen. My budget for sunscreen because we have contact dermatitis. I mean, every spa and drugstore, it's every different price level. And so, if somebody said to me, well, I'm going to, 100% zinc will work, I'll be like, nope, we've tried 75, 100% zincs, right? And
Yeah.
school's the exact same thing. Where, I might say, well, we tried a reading program like that when Jack was 3 and it didn't work. And here's the reason it didn't work. And we don't want to give up that control because we have tried so hard. And so, yes, I agree with you from a psychological standpoint, from the parent side. A whole big piece of it is that control. And that's,
Yeah.
if we can channel that, I know you have done this successfully, and I'm a control freak, so I hope I've done it successfully. If we can channel the control into effective advocacy, we've succeeded.
Yeah, that's right. And you don't know, no one knows everything, right? So you obviously need to give up control in some areas and kind of enrich yourself with other people's professional opinions and otherwise. So, but it's all part of the learning process. And then the other thing that I learned was you got to trust your gut. So we were going in a direction that I wasn't fully comfortable with, because somebody thought that was the best thing for my son. And then, I didn't in that moment, like speak up and say like, I just, I'm not feeling comfortable with that. And then after that first experience, I just, I learned to speak up, and say what I feel, what's in my heart, what I really think is best for him. So I think those were like the 3 takeaways from that first IP experience.
Yeah. Well, and that's, and you know what, Deanna, I think something that's really important to also say here is that nobody is going to do it perfectly. There are
Yeah.
things in my son's IEP that I wish I had said absolutely not to. And there are things that I don't really love, but you pick your battles too.
Yes,
And that
exactly.
that applies across the board. So I'm happy that you brought that up also.
Well, it's a lot of trial and error. I mean, it's a lot of trial and error. You'll find out you thought something was right and then you did it and maybe it turned out it wasn't so right. You have to go in a different direction. So that's just part of the process, I think.
It is part of the process, and it goes back to that confidence piece that we were talking about a minute ago.
Yeah.
that we kind of always think that we're doing it wrong, and maybe we
Yeah.
are doing it wrong, but we aren't going to know until we've tried. And it's
That's right.
the same thing that we say about progress on the actual IEP, data drives instruction.
Yeah.
That also helps to guide our advocacy, and especially if you're new with a young child like Lucas, or
Yeah.
my Jack is only 10. It's like as soon as you get it figured out, they're going to another school. And then as soon as you figure out middle school and puberty and changing classes and all that, then they're going to high school. And then you got to figure out a transition plan. And it's like, you're kind of always trying to keep up. And so I think all of us, myself included, are like, just trying to stay on the hamster wheel, so to speak.
That's right. Yeah, no, yeah. I totally agree.
But those are great tips for taking the reins and the importance of taking the reins and that sort of thing. So, I think another piece of that is what you said about having somebody else, kind of take over the control of maybe something else in your life, like make something else easier so that you can focus on special education, or so that you can focus on just preparing for one IEP meeting, no matter how big or how small that piece is. Because we all kind of have that mommy guilt or parent guilt or whatever that is. And so I think it's kind of important while we're talking about this topic that we talk about that. I'm certain that you've experienced that in one way or another.
Yeah.
So 3 kids, career, building a new business, etc. How do you kind of cope with that?
Well, I just managed to survive. No, I have a lot on my plate, but it's chaos, but it's good chaos, I think. I'm busy, and that's kind of all I know, but there's definitely a lot of mommy guilt. I mean, I think you just have to give yourself grace, honestly, because especially like after this year, I really literally would tell myself, like, you just have to give yourself grace, because it was such a crazy year. But I think this applies to anything. And, I had my hands in so many buckets, especially with all the kids and all of Lucas's stuff, which, as you know, is that there's just so much to that. You know, you have to, you know, there's therapists calling you every day, giving you updates, there's appointments, there's doctor's appointments. It's to manage, you know, there's insurance, there's so many things that just are related to that one child. And then you have the other two, and then you have a home, and you have, like you said, work. You have your hands in so many buckets. You just have to try your best at all of them, and just know that you just can't, they're not all going to be perfect, and you have to give yourself a little grace. I haven't had a whole lot of time for myself, but I'm just, you know, I just try to keep myself kind of calm if that's possible. But this year was a good exercise at that. And I think I did pretty good. But going back to the mommy guilt, you know, at the beginning when Lucas, I'm guilty of buying all the stuff like you. I would go to therapy sessions with Lucas and observe, and anything that they were using or that he liked or he was drawn to, I'm like, I was like on Amazon right away ordering it.
Me too.
So I have everything. And I would come home and I would try to do the same things the therapists were doing with him. And, you know, there's a lot of things that he struggled with, so it wasn't easy. And I would get frustrated and he would get frustrated because I was trying to play therapist at home, and I'm not a therapist, I'm his mom. So of course you have to, you know, reinforce the things he's learning and the things he's doing. But I was trying to do everything the same way they were doing it, and it wasn't working for me or him because I was getting frustrated and so was he. So I kind of just like stopped for a little bit and just figured like home is home, and you know, I'm mom, I'm not a therapist, we'll try our best, but I'm not going to be doing therapy at home with him.
Yes.
So I kind of did that, and then I think now I'm at a point where I'm a little bit more hands-on again. But you know, there isn't a whole lot of time, so we just try to incorporate things into our everyday. But you know, a lot of that was the mommy guilt. Like I wanted to be doing something with him all the time, and you know, slowly I've realized like there's pockets of his day for that, and then there's other pockets of his day to just be at home with the family doing other things. So, but you know, I still feel guilty sometimes about that. Like, should I be doing more? You know, am I doing enough? But with two other kids at home, it's hard, and they're all small. You know, they're all small kids, so they all have their needs that have to be met, and then you have to manage, you know, relationships and all of that, and you know, it's tough. But yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of falling into the mommy guilt.
But that's the secret. And you know what? That's the theme of everything that you've said today is you've got to make it unique to you. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to, you couldn't play therapist because you're mom, and you can't follow an advocate's advice if it doesn't jive with your personal principles and values and interest set. And that's what advocacy boils down to, is really identifying what's important to you, and then finding the information to back it up, and then being able to articulate it in a way that gets other people to understand it. And that exactly is why you're good at what you do, and why I'm so happy that you could share that information in today's episode. So I know I'm super excited because you're going to be speaking at the Special Education and Advocacy Conference, which we've got coming up here on January 23rd. If my audience hasn't seen it on social media just quite yet, you can register over on the website. It's an entirely free conference, entirely virtual. It goes from 9 until 5 Eastern on January 23rd, 2021. And Deanna is going to be speaking at it. So tell us about your topic. Just give us a couple of sentences so people can get excited.
So it's about the parent's role as an advocate, which is a lot of what we talked about today, but just with a little bit more detail about, you know, why we do it, why it's important. We touched on it a little bit. But also, you know, how to be a more effective advocate. And I do talk about some personal, you know, stories, kind of like I did today about it. So it's not so much legal, but it's a lot more, you know, my kind of based on my advocacy journey as a parent.
I'm so excited. I haven't listened to it yet. that's on my list for this week, is to go through and listen to everybody's conferences so that I can talk about them and such. So I'm so excited to have you. Deanna, tell everybody where else they can find information about your company in case people are local to Miami or in case they want to find you on social media and whatnot.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm super excited to be part of it. So my law firm is ABRIL LAW PLLC, and my website is www.abrillaw.com. So that's where they can see my website. Also, I have my email address. That's Deanna, DIANA .abril, ABRIL at abrillaw.com. So I'm happy to hear from anybody that found this interesting. So
wonderful. Well, you are welcome back anytime. I would love, because something that we have in common is that we both like to do policy work and like to do advocacy at the state and federal level. So I'd love to have you on another time to talk about that.
That'll be great. We're just getting started on a session now. It'll be interesting because it's probably going to be virtual. So we'll see how that goes.
Yes, it is interesting. All right. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Appreciate it.